what are your thoughts about dance and performance? What do you think about it?
So, okay, thank you for asking me these questions. Sometimes, thoughts just die in my head, and then I don't even sometimes write it down, or I generally don't journal too much. So many thoughts just come and die here, and very few times when I get asked questions by peers is when I start thinking, or even by students. Oh, actually, I think I need to start articulating this in a very simple way for myself. So coming from that space, uh, for me, dance has been very important in life. As much as I have had a lot of trouble with it, I've had like misunderstandings, I've had problems itself. Even now, I have problems. Like I can't say like it's all beautiful and all that. And I feel it happens so with things that you extremely love. You will, it cannot be linear. It's going to break you so much. It's going to lift you up. And days when I really didn't want to move or dance is when there was a need to dance, like there
Ah,
was a show and you had to be there, you had to show up and all that. So I'm sure like you and me are not privileged to always say a no because our mindset is, I don't feel like performing today. No, we can't, we've not been there. And I don't think I want to be there anytime now, maybe later. I don't know. I feel many times the stage has been a very, very important space for me to thrash things out. It's been very important. It can be theater or just singing or even in a recording studio. When I've gone and done voiceovers for others, I've always felt, okay, I'm like really putting these things into this character, although the character demands something else. So I feel the presence of dance, primarily, I would like to acknowledge in my life than performance per se. Let me begin from dance. I'm happy that this body has understood and is privileged and is somewhat blessed to be able to move in a way that makes me happy. Like I would really like to thank everybody who has been responsible for this, because I like to just move, even if it's sometimes, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, can I get up from the bed in a nice way? When you have a lot of time and you're lying down on the bed, you have not yet gotten off the bed. And I feel small things like that make me feel good about dance. I'm not even talking about any form. So, coming to performance, I would like to talk more about dance though. So, performance really made us who we are. Of course, we have to acknowledge that it can't just be training. But recently, I heard or I read something where a student asked the teacher before joining class, uh, "Oh my God, do I need to perform if I join this class? Can't I just learn it?" And then the teacher, shared as to, and the teacher is a very senior teacher and she's been teaching so many students. And then she was awestruck by this question by this child. I mean, it's not a very small child, probably early teens or something. So the child was like, no, can I just learn it? Can I not make it like a very performative and that's going to stress me kind of thing? And that got me thinking as to this should be a very important part in the pedagogy of any art form, but I would like to talk for dance because though I've done a little bit of theater, I can't voice that strongly for theater as much as I feel I can for dance. So that got me thinking that I myself have felt that I just want to learn a lot of things in class and I don't even want to take it on stage. Like I have a lot of ideas that I don't think will ever go on stage, will ever go on any social media platforms, nothing. And that kept me thinking that there must be so many successful choreographers, directors, writers, actors who have their best work not shown to the world at all. It's there somewhere. Probably they never want to, but probably that's their best work. We never know. Like, if somebody like Maniratnam never did a Nayagan, but he had, imagine he kept the script forever. And then one day after he left this world, and then somebody sees that script, and you're like, oh my God, he never made a movie out of this. So, that kept me thinking during this lockdown that people have a lot of things that are unsaid, and that's very beautiful about them, especially artists. I would like to talk for artists. So for me, performance got to a space like that, like tomorrow when I want to perform, um, what do I want to say? Like really, what do I want to say? In the context of Bharatanatyam itself, it's very confusing for me because I find a lot of songs very problematic, like the content in the song. It's very problematic, okay? And these were songs that I have enjoyed when I was like a teenager, not recognizing the patriarchy involved in it, not recognizing the sexual violence also involved in it. It was just like, oh wow, it's a new narrative. Oh, it's a creative narrative. It was just that, you never looked at the politics of that content. So this really made me thinking as to, I want to be very, very sensitive to what I want to say. If you're a parent, you're going to really be careful about the things that you want to say to your child. Of course, I mean, you at some point you have to really make it a hard space for the children to learn. It can't always be a safe space. But then I figured that I really don't want to say things that I don't stand for, or I must be, it's okay to disagree with the composer. I'm talking with respect to performance because there are a lot of songs, there are a lot of stories that we would not agree to, but we would like to perform it to have our voice in it, to say that, hey, I disagree with the composer. I know I'm performing this piece, but in the end, because in Bharatanatyam pieces, I would like to say, the climax, as much as the composer gives you the climax, there is always an addition from the dancer to end the piece. Okay, they always add something. It might be in the exit, it might be they might exit and come back and say something and leave. I've always, I mean, in seeing so many dancers so many years, this is what I felt, where people have really taken their artistic liberty to say something even when they disagreed with the composer. And with performance, what kept me really alarming about myself is like, I've danced some of these pieces joyously back then, okay? Like I enjoyed dancing it without actually worrying about what is it exactly saying, like the skeletal part of it, what is it saying? Like we were just told, okay, this is that is that. And when I also looked at it, so I think understanding literature in its seed form really helped me to see the problems that are hidden. Okay, so with and for me over the years, I think because I performed those pieces, because I performed a lot of, I mean, a variety of things, be it singing, the acting or dancing, it really made me understand and befriend the stage in a very, very interesting way. Like, I connect to the audience. We are told that don't look at the audience eyes in Bharatanatyam. We're always told, look at the black space in front of you. Don't connect your eye with the audience. I mean, yeah, when we were young, it was like a rule we followed. Oh, no, let's not do it. But then I figured that I was at my best and I enjoyed dancing when I connected to somebody's eyes. Like I could catch them, and I would tell people, hey, this person came to the show, that person didn't come. I could tell my friends, they're like, how are you seeing? So there was a question as to, so you're not involving in your craft. You're seeing who's coming, who's not. Okay, I mean, that's a legitimate question to ask me, but I figured I'm able to immerse and also connect to the people who are watching me. That's what folk artists do, right? How less are they involved? They know. In fact, they improvise based on who has come. If there is a panchayat leader comes, they improvise. If there is a king comes, they improvise. If it's a farmer, they'll, like everybody is equal and everybody is seen in a very, and I really respect the Rasikas or the audience who really come to watch you. I mean, we perform for them in the end. So yeah, so for me, performance it's still a very interesting space right now because I have not befriended performing online. I have no problem with people who are doing, but I just feel I don't know why I want to do this. Like many people have asked me. I mean, actually, some shows were also paid performances. I felt probably I'm right now privileged in a way where that money can actually go to somebody else who wants to perform. And I also feel I am at a space right now where I can make my own opportunities. So I think I need to accept that privilege and make way for another person, be it senior or junior. That doesn't matter. I don't think we should always say that let's make way for the youngsters only. There are a lot of people older than me who could never be there. but I know they are very talented. So at this point, I don't connect age and all that, because, in a classical system of training, there's always this senior junior.
Mm.
I'm sure other fields have, but, especially in the classical training, if it's a senior in class, you will always think that they know better. And if there's a junior in class, you'll always feel like, oh, you came after me. Maybe you don't know a few things. I mean, it's slowly changing, but I feel you can help anybody. It really need not be. If I want to help somebody, I will see who deserves it the most. And I have a lot of people. And I think this is something I want to do for the field, for the art form I really like. Like, I love Bharatanatyam. That's why I even have problems with it. It's important to have a problem. You love somebody so much, and you can't just be happy every day. Like, I always like being away from it for some time to come back. It's like how they say, couples have to like be away for some time to like, I mean, that differs, but it works well for me. Like, for my husband, it doesn't work. For him, he's very happy that he's seeing me every day during the lockdown. So I feel very opposite. I'm like, I think we should stay in different rooms for 1 week, so that after 1 week, when we meet within the same house, we feel something. I come from a very different space also, because I've been traveling, and then I come back home, it's like, wow, So yeah, so for me, dance and performance right now is still beautiful, but I'm questioning a lot. I think somewhere we all end up there. It's important, especially in the classical arts. They've always told to be safe. You can ask questions in class, but the practice of asking questions through your craft is not normalized. Why do you want to do that? Just believe in the poet. Yes, I will believe in the poet, because he or she is the one who has given this piece of work to me. But if there is a visual art form coming over it, I need to put my 2 spoons of salt or chili powder, really. So yeah, for me right now, dance and performance is this. And I must thank my teachers a lot, all my teachers, because they've always set me free. They're like, go, explore. We know you'll come back one day. Even if you don't come back, it's okay. Like, you get it. So that freedom helps. You feel like going back to them. Like, my parents have been very independent have been very open with my freedom. Like, when I was in college, there used to be my friends who are boys from college who used to come home at like 9 o'clock and pick me up for a night show. My father never asked. He was like, okay, my father asked, are you coming back home, or are you going and staying over with your friend's house? For me, I was like, because I had other friends who didn't get permission like this. And I was like, that made me feel I must respect this freedom they are giving me. It should not be like, oh, Mila, Mauka Mila, let me like it. Of course, you have to enjoy. I mean, please, I'm not really like morally saying things, anything. But I felt the fact that my father didn't question, and he truly never felt like questioning. It's not like he was, my father and mother both. It's not like they felt, no, I should not put my daughter down in front of her friends. I'll talk to her later. Nothing. Even when I after the movie, I went and stayed with friends and came back the next day. The only thing they used to call and ask is, should I keep breakfast for you? Should I make tea for you? Because food planning is important. No cooking extra and wasting. So for me, that, and then the way my teacher set me free, it gave me courage to explore. And I feel courage is not instilled in students of dance. Like, it's told that there is an age to choreograph, there is an age to do this, there is an age. And, the problem is, I actually want to address this in the workshop. The problem is when you associate success to choreography. Everything has to be good. Everything has to be really like there. Why can't there be bad choreographies that you want to present to your circle of friends? You can think it's bad. You will definitely get something. And I'm not addressing mediocrity here. We've all been mediocres at some point and grown out of it. We need it. At some point, we need it. We need to adhere that even now we can suddenly get mediocre. Tomorrow I can get mediocre. You can get mediocre. You can't really like. But I felt that this trait has to be instilled as part of the pedagogy as to, okay, I will give you a line from this song. You try. You try. With whatever you have learned, you try and show me. That child will really, and when in academic education, there is so much being experimented. In dance, yes, I mean, some schools do, etc. But overall, I feel youngsters get questioned as to why do you want to experiment these things now? First, you train well and then start. Of course, you need a basic training, good technique, yes, but you have to understand that he or she might want to give this a shot. Okay,
Mm.
let me try and see. Somewhere it's stopped because they associate success, age to choreography. Recently, I heard somebody say, "Oh, everybody is a choreographer today. So what? So what? Isn't it a good thing?" I mean, of course, everybody is an actor. You can say, Akshay, you can say like, okay, everybody is an actor. But we will choose which actor we want to go see, whose work we believe in, whose work has changed priorities, right? You might have liked the work of somebody 10 years ago and today you might dislike. It can be vice versa also. So I feel in my field, in the classical dance field, I think there should be a very, first of all, a very big change in pedagogy. And then to let students be, if they want to learn the art form just to learn it, let it be. Do not really like plan or make them too goal oriented. They might change, they might not change. There are so many students who've come with the goal of, I want to become the best dancer of Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore. And then they have really found interest in something else because the dance form does something to you. Learning the skill does something to you. It really like pierces in. Like if you go to a chess academy and start learning chess, it'll do something to you that you might want to leave chess or apply chess somewhere else or just go deeper into chess. Anything can happen. So yeah, this is what overall I feel. Even now I feel. Right now I'm feeling this. That's what I'm saying.
Amazing, Preeti. This is so true. I think one thing these times, these difficult times, and I see this is very common across people, artists who still continue
Yeah,
when they know the road is really, really difficult, is
yeah,
this love for the art. And what you spoke about, the problem and the problem because of the love. I
yeah,
think that is I think that is where the key, I think, is for us who continue to say, whatever it is, I
yeah,
love it so much that I will continue.
yeah.
And thank you for saying that. And
Yeah.
the place you're coming to now in terms of pedagogy and talking about training and children, I think that brings me to my second question. The question of how do you define or explain training and practice, the training and the continual practice in the context you work in. And if you can say something about your context as well, which we have already started hearing, and if you can get into that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I have students who ask me, can you give me a practice routine? Can you give me a practice regimen? Like how you would ask your nutritionist, can you give me a diet plan? So, so what does the nutritionist do? Examines that who is this person? What is their lifestyle? What should I say? It's exclusive, right? So it's important to really look at each student exclusive. In a space where there are many students, it becomes tough. In a dance institution where there are a lot of students, like 100, 200 students, you might actually not be logically be able to give attention to everybody. So I think that's where we need some arrangement done so that have like a core training team, prepare a core training team, take some time to just prepare this core training team so that they are really able to work individually with students. And like how schools have parent teachers meeting. I'm not saying institutions should have parent teachers meeting, but there should be uh, some time given to understand if the student is actually interested or not. Even if it's not, he or she is not interested, you don't need to say, tell the parents that no, she's not interested, he or she is not interested, can you just think of something else? No, that's not what I'm saying. But you should see if the child loves being in this space and different ways in which you want to immerse it in the art. Some of them don't want to do the pure dance element. Some of them like doing the storytelling element of dance. Some of them like both. Some of them like makeup a lot. Some of them like costume designing. So I feel tapping it somewhere will make you understand this is all part of dance training only. I'm saying, it's important to consider each student exclusive and give them what they seek. It can take some time, you know. I mean, you can't, I don't know, I can't really talk for dance institutions because I don't have one. I have not worked in a very big institution. So, you know, I'm sure they might be facing a lot of other logical issues. So I'm just suggesting it in what small experience I know, that we need this. A big school can do a monitoring of each child. You know, a dance institution is not as big as an academic school. So you can come up with ways in which you can really see what each child is interested or not interested in. That's also important. You can't just see like, okay, good in dance, good in running, not good in being regular. It's okay. I mean, you need to really like get to this thing. So I feel when my students ask this, first I tell them that I don't have a practice regimen. I want to tell them this. Like, I don't plan things like, okay, today 1 hour should be abhinaya. Evening 1 hour should be just doing pure dance. In fact, Akshay, I've never done this in my life. There is I'm nobody to talk about riyaz, to be very honest. Okay, like if you know, even after a few years, when I'm like 50, 60, and somebody calls me and tells, Preeti, so many years in the field, can you talk about riyaz? I will not be the best person. And I feel I work well like this because, see, I've understood that my body needs rice. My body can take rice 3 times a day, because that's what my mother gave me as a child, and that helped me. Okay, so when I read a lot of things about itna hi rice khana hai, only this much only, but it's not working for me. Yes, I might lose weight if I don't eat rice, but I figured that by eating rice, it's not doing any damage to me, you know. So I kind of found that balance. Like that, I feel for me, practice, riyaz, uh, with the training that I have received is, for me, truly, it starts with every day. I don't miss listening to music. It can be anything. I just plug in, and that's not too planned also. Okay, like I don't like planning my practice or things to do with my dance. If there is a show, yes, you can't help but you have to plan. But when I don't have it, I like the impromptu-ness of it. Like I like sometimes, like when I want to record a video, I just do it. Like I feel that rawness really inspires me. I like looking at myself in that raw element than a very like ornamented, like super practice element. I don't connect to that super practice element. I think it's a very one-time thing and it's over. You know, I don't go back to it. Like even when when we come back to the same play, you know, we see to it that we have also felt that, okay, it's been redundant for some time, and then we try to seek something else. We've had this constant you know, fight in our minds as to what is this, why are we doing the same thing, no, we have to try something. So I felt that for me, riyaz, or if you want to, yeah, like associate it to practice, I will not miss listening to music. The worst days also I need music, but in the worst days sometimes I don't need dance, but I need music. So for me, practice starts with having my practice starts with having this deep rooted connection with music. Yes, I moved to silence. I also I also encourage my students to move to silence. That is a very different feeling. So, but I figured that I again come back to this space of, I need somebody even breathing in a corner. That also matters to me. Like that also will inspire me to, I need something. Like there is no place in the world where there is no sound. You have your breathing with you, right? When I do pranayama and yoga nidra, that's what we are told. Uh, don't, I mean, try not to listen to anything or any noise. First you're given an opportunity to listen to everything around you. Fan running in your room, you know, and then the traffic, and then somebody talking in your room, in your house. First you're given the space to listen to everything, and then after some point everything is cut down. After everything is cut down, you can't help but feel your breath, right? So I encourage I'm talking with respect to me and what I tell my students, okay, because I think that's me being honest. So I suggest them few things that I do, and see and ask them to try if that works for them. And I teach one-on-one, Akshay. So you know, I know which student comes from where. You know, like I have the privilege of teaching one-on-one. Okay, that's a very different thing, because I know a lot of my friends, seniors, etc., who do classes also because they need to sustain with a larger number of people. That's a very different thing. I can't really say, I can't comment on it per se, but they're doing it with a specific purpose. So for me, it is easier to plan a very different practice regimen for each person. So I figured that it starts with music, no missing music, and I don't move every day actually. Like I don't physically move every day in a very dance way, but I am active. I am an active person in general. So with respect to practice, I think I will still go back to the fact that I stare at things a lot as I listen to music. And the staring has helped me really compose complicated pieces also. Sometimes as soon as you get an idea, you want to try it on your body. So many times I've restricted myself to not do that and just let imageries come. And then when I do it, many times it's not like what I imagine, but something else comes. So for me, the day I move, I find it very special because I do it once in a while. It's very special for me. If I do it every day, okay, this is really not like, okay, I'm doing it, all of you follow. This has worked for me. Not moving every day works in my craft. Okay, so for some people, they need it every day, and their output will be according to that. Like I have come to a space where I like intimate spaces. A very senior Bharatanatyam teacher recently told that all of you listen. Bharatanatyam is actually for intimate spaces, she said. And all of us are really young in the group, in the call, and we all went silent. We have danced in like big stages where we look like ants. Okay, we've danced in such stages, and then we felt like unless there is a screen or like there a video or you're sitting in the down row, you really can't see us or connect to our craft, especially if it's solo. You just can't. We look like ants just moving. So when she said that, I felt it's so true. And over the last 2 years, how many intimate spaces have opened up in the country? That's really making artists come out and really say things that they would have never been able to say on bigger stages. And I know a lot of my friends who have said a goodbye to proscenium stages and have completely moved to intimate spaces. So, so in my training, and this is the context in which I work. Okay, so since I've also kind of moved to, I can't say I've completely gotten rid of the proscenium. You can't say that. I think you still have dreams, etc. I think I'm still in that space where, okay, someday, some stage, okay, we will do, but it's not as enticing as the intimate spaces for me anymore. It has its beauty and all that. But yeah, with respect to Bharatanatyam, I think I like really having, like I said, I connect to audiences on big stages. Like I look at their eyes. Imagine in a smaller space. It really helps me with my art and what I want to say through my art. I want to say some more things about practice. So I was at a workshop and there was a teacher who interrupted our class, and it was a class with somebody else. So she interrupted and she asked, okay, all of you stop, because it was a question answer class and we were asking some questions to the other teacher. And when you sit down, when artists sit down to talk, so many questions come, like things that you will never address through your art, you'll start talking about it. So then she paused the class because she was observing that each one was really saying their own thing, and she paused and she said, okay, stop. How many of you practice every day? Out of the class of 40, 50, 40 people lifted their hands. Okay, so we were some 10 of us who didn't lift. We don't practice every day. So we were like, okay, what? We felt very like, okay, I mean, are we really not part of this or anything? But now I can really say that I'm saying this because it's helped me sustain in a small manner. See, I should be honest, if I'm part of a big dance company and it requires me to like do few things, I mean, that's a very different scenario. I have been offered to be contracted full-time dancers at dance companies. I said no because I know I can't do that. I can't always tell that I'll be in shape. I can't always say that I can't. I mean, if it's a specific project and I am hired for it, etc., that's different. So I can't, I feel it's a burden to always have long hair, to always be in shape, to always really like, and first of all, I've come a long way to accept the way I look, Akshay. It's been a long journey. Now I don't feel bad about the way I look. You know, I wanted to have an eye surgery done and then a lot of things. And then I was like, no, 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 no. I want to be how I am and let people just accept however I am. And even if I don't get chances to perform, I don't want to really feel bad about it. And at that time is when I got this confidence of creating my own opportunities. And theater really, really became a space for me to say things, open out, create my own opportunities. And when we even premiered Yamuna, which you saw, I felt it was a trial for the first time when I came on stage alone, and I've never done theater alone, one woman theater, talking for 2 hours. Everything was new. Even now, it's new for me. So I felt, wow. I mean, this was an opportunity we created for ourselves. You know, more than somebody calling me, I felt very, very proud of this. You know, and we are privileged somewhere to fund a small performance like that. We did ticket the shows. There were some shows where we got 500 rupees and we felt bad, but this was a conscious decision from us that we wanted to invest in this play and tell something to few people. So people who are privileged must invest and take some things somewhere to some people through their art. You know, it's like saying, you know, if not everybody can afford sustainable products in this world, right? So if the people who can afford, they can buy and support these small businesses who are actually making things handmade that our grannies did. They're actually making it like a small, so you can buy from them. I can't expect somebody from the lower middle class to stop them from buying hammam for 10 rupees and ask them to buy a handmade soap for 200 rupees. I can't do that. Probably hammam is not as good as this handmade soap, but I can't say don't buy hammam for 10 rupees. That means I am not helping them be sustainable with their money. You know, so this, for me, the also this wave of sustainability and being eco-friendly, when it hit me, it hit my art too. It really hit my art. It started telling me things about, I am not at all valuing the environment in which I want to produce this art or create this art. You know, when the plastic ban was imposed, and still it's being used sometimes, single-use plastic, and I was thinking, it was a pause in everybody's life as to, because all our houses in the 90s and all, I mean, of course, when I was in the 90s, you know, you won't believe, every Sunday we used to meet in a relative's house. Everybody used to bring their plastic covers that they collected, and they used to fold it flat and put it in one other bag. So this was an activity. Okay, and now I'm thinking, wow, we had so many plastic bags at home, and now this is not even a thing. So, you know, for me, when I see that paradigm shift, and then how it's affected my art and my way of living also, everything started mattering to me. Like, I did become sensitive than what I was. And I tell myself to not let that sensitivity affect me so much that I don't I start hating my art. No, that can't happen. But I am all for questioning things that have been normalized in the name of pedagogy and in the name of training and in the name of giving opportunities. So I think I am coming from a space where I can question and make things easier for people who deserve to be on stage. I am not feeling so bad that I don't have opportunities and all that. That was a phase, actually. That was a phase where I used to be like, what, yeah, same people get called and same people perform. All those things are like normal. But when actually social media has been very helpful, I figured that I can make a space of my own. You know, I want to, if this is not going to end and in the next 2 years, 3 years, we're going to be like this, touch wood, no, it should not. I'm waiting for the vaccine to come. But I'm just saying that, you know, I don't mind just if there's a new play written and if it's a one woman play and I want to do it, I will do it in my living room, shoot it in my mobile and put it on my YouTube channel. Whoever wants to watch. I don't want, if I want, I'll take it, or I want. If I'm not doing it because I want to make a livelihood out of it. Because again, I'm coming from a space where I can create art without spending a lot of money. You know, but if I have the money, if I want to make a group work, I will see to it that this money that I have should be spent and given to artists for, because all of us are most of the times underpaid. Okay, so I think accepting privileges is a huge part of one's practice and training. It comes from having your own space. It comes from not only own space, it comes from if you have space in your living room or not.
Yeah.
So in Bangalore, I've never had this problem of practice in a space and all that. My apartment, nobody complained downstairs. So in the apartment I live in Chennai, so I can't really like thump or anything, because people downstairs complain, and I don't have a problem with them complaining, because I mean it's a shared space. You really can't question them or anything, and they're very old also. So that made me think as to, wow, I actually have privileges for other things, but I don't have the privilege of a space to move in by like actually dancing. And Bharatanatyam, it's a grounded form, so you somewhere have to use your feet and all that. So I can't do that. That paved way for me to understand fluidity in my form. Not make a bit of sound, but still move and still make your art impactful. Your movement vocabulary in Bharatanatyam impactful. So I feel everything has a side of letting you explore. But I will again disclaimer, I am purely talking from a space of privilege. All of you, I'm telling it to all of you. That's why I'm able to say a few things. So yeah, I want to be honest. I think it's important to accept some privileges that we have. Of course, I'm not privileged in few areas, but
even the privilege of internet, even the privilege that we have a device we can talk to, it's a privilege. And accepting that definitely is important, and find ways where we are not privileged. And where we are, and to work together with this. And I personally also and I really liked the way you said that there is a practice, it's very personalized, it is so personalized to you. And that, I'm sure, is helping you sail through these times, because you have this personalized understanding of yourself. Otherwise, to pass these crazy times
no, it's really, it's very tough. And some people are performing a lot in front of the device, because many people otherwise won't get these opportunities, especially in my field. Really young people, some of these youngsters, upcoming youngsters, they are not given opportunities in these organizations. But here, at least through an online platform, they feel like, okay, I have my name on a poster, I have my picture on a poster, I'm finally being recognized as a person who can perform in this festival. So that has to be acknowledged also, because this lockdown has made space for people who otherwise cannot be seen on stages,
And
so that helps them.
This will surely inform their practice, and how you spoke about practice being so individual. And without that, it is difficult. And it does not fit into the category of, and as you informed us, is it does not necessarily put into a category of, okay, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do, but I need to listen to myself and identify that. And work through it. That's great. And we have already started speaking about this, and so let's move to the last question. And you have spoken about it in a way.
I mixed it.
And that's perfect. That's fluidly moving into the next part, that your dance practice, your work, and your ecosystem. And you have already brought in the ecosystem, which has to do with environment and subjects which matter to you, and the current context. Define you as artist now. If you have to say a little more, if you have to articulate a little more about how all of this ultimately define you as artist in this moment.
There are some days I've felt, why couldn't I have another profession, so that I felt I could have contributed to the world we are in. Like, some days I felt, oh God, I could have been a frontline worker. Or can I become a frontline worker now? Is it too late? So, some days dance didn't give me these answers. I was like, what am I doing as an artist? How am I really helping society? I'm sure most of us, some days I felt, okay, me being a dancer, how much is it really helpful? And that time I was not actually teaching that many students as I am teaching now. I teach 5 or 6 students one-on-one, which is spread over the week and the month. So when the lockdown began, I had only one student who I was teaching. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm teaching this student and that student feels good talking to me and I'm making somebody mentally feel good. Okay, that's how I'm contributing through my dance. To arrive at this, it took a very long time for me. Okay, because also because I told you that I've become so sensitive about a lot of things happening around us, and a lot of things, a lot of important cases that are unanswered, and people are roaming freely with respect to a lot of things. Everything really hurt me, and I was like, oh God, this now, and then how am I really being useful was a very big thing that mattered a lot to me. So, but at home, I live with a person who is a teacher. Like he trains young minds and he's questioning the pedagogy of engineering in India where nothing is taught so that they can face the world, you know. So very few people actually stay back and work for India. Amidst his students, in fact, I keep asking him, so do you guys talk about, I mean, it's okay if people want to leave our country. I'm really not commenting on that. But, I was trying to ask when you guys research, I mean, he's from a technology background. He's not from biology and things. And so when I was in school, research is biology. That's all. And computer research, electrical research, and all was not part of my understanding of research. Research is looking through the microscope. That was my idea of research. So I always felt research and development is happening with respect to biology and medicine. And then when I met him and his group of friends, I understood there is research in everything. I was research, right? So for a long time, it was only biology, medicine. So when I understood that research happens in a lot of areas, so I started asking my husband who works in the artificial intelligence research area, because I see technology being used and the same technology being misused. As much as I can't really talk against technology because I'm using it every hour of the day. So, it's very hypocritical of me to say so much technology. Oh my God. No, 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 no. I can't say that. But I was just trying to understand, why can't there be something researched and brought out where it cannot be misused at all? Like, like you have a Gmail and there are hackers for it. You have and there are like another group that enters. So I was trying to ask, of course, every researcher is doing something that can help the world. But there are some pure math researches where it's purely for academic bliss. It's not really to help the world. Okay, so that also I understood, because I was trying to understand how is pure maths research helping the world. But then he said there are some things that also I'm understanding these things coming from a very different field where I never had conversations about these things with anybody. It is dance, music, color, all only this. So then he said, no, 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 pure maths is more for academic bliss. But there was one research in pure maths called the number theory, on which our credit cards and debit cards are based. And I was thinking, so like then I figured, oh, okay, even when people think that some researchers actually don't yield things and do good for the world, maybe later something will happen. You never know. That's how the world is functioning. So I was trying to ask, is there research? Do you work on things where a group of people cannot misuse it at all, do whatever? Can it be developed in such a way that it really is put to good use alone? So, I mean, these are questions that can't be answered even by engaging researchers and all that. So for me, this is my question, like, can we really look at things or create things that predominantly don't damage people? You can't help. There will be, whatever you create, there'll be one person at least who will take offense for it, because he or she comes from a space where it might bring bad memories for them or etc. You can't really help. But I was trying to understand, we should be sensitive with what we're trying to say in our art, So now in this situation, and craft and this thing during the lockdown, and me as an artist during the lockdown, and where I see myself also, I feel I want to wait for the stage. I really want to wait for the stage, because it's been a dashboard for all my emotions. Even that, at there was one some dance performance where I had to be a saint in penance. Okay. And it was for like quite some time. I shouldn't be moving because I'm in penance. And my signal was when the fruit, I'm under a tree. The fruit will fall on me, and then I wake up and I see. So I don't know when the fruit's going to fall. There's no tree, there's no fruit. You know, in Bharatanatyam, everything is suggestive, right? Unless it's a big dance drama and you have properties and all that. So, and I sleep uh, very soon. Like, you know, if I'm let alone, I just go to sleep. So my friends were very apprehensive that, oh my God, what if she goes to sleep on stage? And during one rehearsal, I did go to sleep. But on stage, then they were like, there was one person standing behind me who kept her feet below my butt so that I don't actually, and I'm a little up and all that. So, you know, I figured that the stage is a space where I have been still also for like a good amount of time. And then there was another piece where I had to be a statue. In fact, like I am a carved statue on stage. I can't move. At least as a saint, you can breathe, even if you're in penance. As statue, and I was like, I was young, okay, when I did these things, especially the statue thing. I was very young and very fidgety. You can't really be a statue when you're young. That's not a thing for a child at all. So then when I went back in memory lane, I figured that I need the stage. I mean, stage as in, I'm talking about small spaces, okay, right now. So I can make my terrace my stage. I've made my kitchen my stage, you know. So we've really adapted that way very well. But I just feel somewhere I don't want to convert my house into a dancing space for like that. A home is a home. Like, you know, I don't want to really like open it up for like, hi, I'm performing in my house today, this thing. And I want my house to be sometimes not the space which I want to project as a dance space. You know, like, so that bothered me a few days. Okay. And then befriending the online dancing has been very tough because I was like, why am I in a hurry to do this? Okay, if I do it, what am I going to dance? For which I just don't have answers even now. But I figured if I want to move and I want to share with people about a new work that I've done, I will record a video and put it up on my social media handle. And I'm really, I want to use it in a very responsible manner. Okay, and then if anybody wants to reach out to me to talk about that, that's it. I feel I don't want to be really governed by these organizers of the classical dance field. And I don't want to be told like, you know, it's very complicated, the politics behind this. And see, and the best of dancers are also not getting paid as much as they invest in getting the technical things ready for it. How is this sustainable? Even without these things, we plan so much for a performance, lights and this and all. And now in a smaller space, it's more complicated. The angle has to be correct. You can't lose power. You can't this thing. And there was somebody who commented about a dancer's house background. A puppy went behind. So that was a problem for somebody. I mean, you know, what is this? Why are we throwing our privileges like this? In a time like this, somebody has got up from the bed and had the inspiration to get ready and face the camera. Is a big thing. See, for me, even when there is a talk happening and somebody coughs and people are like, shh, I'm like, why? Why are we doing that? Why are you pushing that person? It's a house. You made the house suddenly a performing space. And and we have to really acknowledge our family members' normal activities and not really like, you know. So for me, these things got thinking, and you know, I have to set up my house. And okay, set up meaning some basic lighting, this thing. And sorry, Akshay, I was like, no, I really don't have the energy to do these things. Okay. Like, I don't mind going into the wild and just dancing for my heart's content, getting wet in the rain, dancing in the rain and coming back home. And I think I did a performance. Some dog would have watched me. I'm very happy. Enough. Okay. So yeah, I'm very like this. So, but in today, in the context of dance today, I heard a lot of people talk. I think that has been the best part about this lockdown. A lot of senior dancers, junior dancers, other artists, not only dancers, even art managers, even sponsors, uh, directors of dance films, all these people talking. And this has been very, very beneficial during the lockdown, to hear all these people talk, whom otherwise we would not be able to hear, happening from the comforts of our homes and listening to people's 50 years of experience. And they're, I mean, not half that age also sometimes. Okay. So that has been very, very good. And I heard one very senior dance teacher talk about how this should be a good lesson. I mean, this should be a good time from where we have to start understanding how to film dance, to understand dance filming as a special subject. You don't need to only make documentaries about dancers. You can make documentaries about the things that I'm talking now, about the questioning, documentary about somebody's questions about their craft. So, and she's a very senior dancer, and when she said this, I felt so good. Sometimes, and they are not from my generation, but they are really understanding what this generation needs so that they can survive ahead. That's being a visionary, to not, like, I can't really, if I don't know, I felt good that a person like her, who's very senior, really understood what the generation needs. And she also wants to be part of it. She's not only saying this to all of you do it, all of you take it. She said, even if I have to be filmed, let's have like a team who studies this. Let's train people to do dance filming, all these things. So such things are very good. And those developments we definitely need. But people who can't afford to have like good lights at home, good sound for their life and all, just let them be. Let them just like, and yeah. And I know a lot of people who are unable to cater to this, and they feel their craft is not good because of that. Because we see others, and I mean, this happens with everybody. When you're a child and your neighbor has bought a car and your father has not bought a car, you will be like, but we don't have cars. Normal. But of course, it's, and then you have parents in the end to really like tell you, as to, even if the father says, no, I don't have money now, beta, but when you grow up, I mean, you have that comfort, right? Some of us have, many don't have. That's another thing. But I think as a community, we have to really make each other feel good about what minimal they have to offer, barring mediocrity. We should work with their, if you feel they've not upped their game, and if they've not upped their game and they still want to project themselves and just keep doing, that somewhere leads to a very capitalist behavior. And we can't really, that should not be encouraged. If I am somebody at 30 wants to help a 20-year-old really navigate through this field, I should really be very, very honest to that person as to, if there is something that has not been truly worked on about the craft, I should be able to guide. Not as a teacher only. I mean, anybody can, you can say things like, be honest and say, so that they are not, when you're questioned for, see, like I said, tomorrow you and me can become mediocre. Okay. But we are ready to face that. We are mentally like, okay, it might, we can take it. A 20-year-old being guided, and at between 20 and 25 every day getting told that you're mediocre, it might really be too much. So they need somebody who can really make them understand, embrace mediocrity, and understand to get out of it. You can't always be in that well. It's not going to do good. So as much as we are considerate, sensitive, this can't be an excuse to just like, like lean back and say, yeah, I will do when it hits me. I will do when it's this thing. So, there is this, my husband introduced me to this concept of creativity, this stand-up comedian. I don't know, not stand-up comedian. Okay, a person, I'll tell his name. So he says this thing called open mode, closed mode for creativity. Okay. So, some of us think, when the idea comes, idea will come to me someday. I'll just wait for it. So that is your open mode. So closed mode is show up and spend some 1 hour just thinking. If an idea comes, let it come. Otherwise, leave it. But show up for that 1 hour of thinking or just being there. So that is your closed mode. So how he was saying, you need both of these. It's very important, this open mode and closed mode. I'll talk about this in the workshop actually. I need to show that part where he talks about it. I don't know who it is. I'll tell you. So it was so interesting because I always work in an open mode. Okay. When the idea hits me, I'll do it. And then he suggested, okay, why don't you try close mode once? Give it a shot. We don't know what comes out of it. And I tried, and it took some time for me because I was so adamant with no. I want it to be natural only. It has to be organic only. You can't plan for it to be organic, right? That's not organic then. So yeah, so it was very yeah, it's very interesting. That concept really helped. It helps in everything I feel, not only for a creative process, more for a creative process, but it opened my eyes. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so much so, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, we can all very clearly hear how these things or the times are sort of shaping us and really clarify who we are and where we are heading and what are the things important to us, definitely defined and understood. So that's great, Preeti. Thank you so much. Yeah,